but I haven't got my screen up, so I'm going to have to check. And because I did it in the wrong order again, but then, you know, one day I'll get it right. Just not today. Bom live, it says. And it says live chat there, one watching. Click on that, and it should be me. I should be watching myself. Yay! There we go. Right, so I'm going to turn the sound down, otherwise you get all the echo. And than that. Right, okay. That should be me. Should be working. Should be good. Got my script over here. Yeah, you heard it. I've got a script this week, which is amazing. What's that on top of? Oh, another script. Get rid of that one. Right. And yeah, that's sort of in the right order. And all I've got to do now is get that over there in such a way that I can see it, because that's my backup. That proves that I really am alive and kicking. Well, that's my theory anyway, because that's the one that's got the chat on it. So we've got 2 watching, and that's me plus one other. So I shall say something in here. Hi, welcome. I do that because this is also going out on podcast, so not everybody can see what's being said, if you see what I mean. Let me just check this again. Yeah, that's definitely working. Okay, so put that back onto there and try that. Yay! Right, okay, I'm back I'm back in my comfort zone now. Got a bit of a cold, so I do apologise. I might end up with a coughing fit, you never know. Just as I say it, it starts to happen. So there we go. That's life for you. Right, got a new backdrop, as you can see. Who have we got here? Anybody come in yet? No, nobody's here yet. Got 5 watching though. Don't be shy, come say hello. Let's have a look on, what's that? Oh no, it says LBC's live. In about 5 minutes, I should get a notice on my other screen, because I have 2 screens. 2 screens. I should get a notice on my other screen saying I've gone live, because that's what normally happens. And I think to myself, thank God for that, I wasn't sure. But then, of course, I'm watching myself, so yeah, whatever. So I've got to keep that there. Egil, hi, good afternoon, how you doing? He says, I'm just testing my son's Audio-Technica plastic thing with a 80s compilation album. Sounds just fine. Hang on, I'm just son's Audio-Technica plastic thing. Oh, that'd be like my Series 70 then, which is a sort of a plastic Audio-Technica type turntable. I think they're quite good in terms of, you've got to go a long way to get up to get much better. It does seem that there's an awful lot of different variations of the same thing. I mean, the one that I've been playing with just recently, of course, which is on my yesterday's video, is very, very low end. Well, you know, it's beggars can't be choosers is what I was about to say, really. Beggars can't be choosers. So, last week's video of this, the car crash from last week, I had a slight problem with it. At the end, it was all lovely, and I thought it was one of the best ones we had. We had a lot of new people, and it was relatively good. A certain amount of dialogue going both ways, and it came up on the screeners twice, then it disappeared. Do not know what happened there, so I will make sure that when it stops this week, I will walk away, let it do its thing, because there was more than one and it was doing all sorts of things wrong. Anyway, that's just the way it is. All right, the vinyl as usual on compilation albums from back then. Yes, it was. You were talking about the K-Tel type stuff. Thin vinyl used on compilation. Yeah, it was. Kelvin. Good afternoon. Good evening. Yeah, they had thin vinyl. I don't know that thin vinyl's necessarily a problem, because I used to quite enjoy playing the folding things that they used to send out with Reader's Digest. I always thought they were good fun. Had a problem, they had to try and stick them to the LPs or records to stop them sliding, the flexi discs. But there is this thing about thick vinyl, and I'm wondering how much of it is marketing and how much of it is actuality. But I think virgin vinyl is probably a good idea. Apparently it doesn't need to be black. They make it black because that's what people expect. I think that was because shellac came out black because they couldn't leave that any other colour. They put carbon in it. So, what do we know? There's so many things that are myths and the like. So I find it... I try and do the myth busting, but some things I just haven't managed to get into yet. And sometimes you have to wonder where the myths are and try and find them, because not all myths are untrue, which is sort of what I'm saying, I think. Right, anybody see my video yesterday? Yes, virgin vinyl seems to be better. I would agree with that. So, did anybody see my video yesterday? I'm going to have a drink because I'm talking too much again. I was quite pleased. I followed. I've written a script. Let me go by the script. I'll go by the script. I just thought I'd try and do it professional this time. That isn't a script. Oh, it doesn't matter how hard I try. It just doesn't work that way. Nice. Is it that one? Or is it that one? No. Must be that one. Yeah, that's the one. Right, okay, I'll go with this one. And can't have it full size because I can't then see the comments. So what can I do about that? Make it quarter size. Then I can still read the comments. But then I can't read the whole of that. So I've got alter the zoom. Oh, God. These things are so complicated. Oh, what a way. Anyway, what I was going to say was, let's shove that over there. And, make that full size. And I've still got you guys there. Now, I've got there. Eggle said, no, I didn't. I'm not sure. Oh, right, okay, yeah. I asked the question, have you seen my video yet? And the answer was, no, I haven't. Right, okay. I did a thing with the Crosley. I have done 2 videos this week. One was with the UFO 202, and the other one was with the Crosley and changing the cartridge. And I followed the advice from Westlife from a couple of years ago, and I put on the BP2ATC, which is a magnetic cartridge that's in the same form factor as the ceramic cartridges or crystal cartridges of the old days, and it's the same mountings as a Tuadenchi thing, but it's magnetic and it's of better quality and it costs a lot more, but it's not expensive. It's only £9, and so I put one of those on, and the output is 300 millivolts, so it's an awful lot bigger than your average. Is it 300 millivolts? Yeah, something like that. It's the same output level as the other cartridges, so it's a direct fit for the Tuadenchi, and it gives you better sound quality because it's magnetic, not ceramic. And I thought I'd put that in and see if it actually improved the the playback on the Crosley, which I must admit I actually quite like. This is where people. If you've got any opposite opinions, then put it either in the chat now or put it in the comments later. The Crosley's growing on me. I mean, it's American styling of the period, which, because I've seen some stuff of that type. So it's not what we would recognise as being that sort of thing. However, the speakers in it are adequate. It gives what my customers used to call a nice tone. It's got a nice tone, you know, which meant that it's not particularly high frequencies, is it? Now, I don't like all those scratchy noises, they used to say. And it's not got much bass. Oh, no, you don't want it bassy because it rattles, makes my teeth rattle. So none of that. But if you're talking about just playing a record and hearing it and not being torn apart by the sound or whatever, it's okay. And anyway, so that's what I was doing. But I'm actually not. I'm not particularly unimpressed with it. Although, having said that, if you listen to the video, which I put up yesterday, you can hear a little bit of direct feed. Unfortunately, they're so hot on the copyright stuff. It's very hard to do a record player review or anything to do with records and actually have something that you can hear, because more than about 2 or 3 seconds and we get slapped with a copyright claim and then the whole thing goes to pot. So the only way I can get around that is to do maybe 2 videos, one with the chatting and the blurb and whatever, and then do the second one with the music in it, which can then be it will be allowed to be played. It just there's no income from it. Not that I get any income from mine anyway, because my channel's not big enough. But this is another story. But I don't want to be in the position where I'm getting penalised, because later on, when I do get a big enough channel to actually make some money out of it, then it would be nice to actually have videos that I can make money out of. Does that make sense? I'm pretty sure you probably can work out what I'm on about. Anyway, so that's the situation I've found myself in. But the sound quality feeding out of the headphone socket from the Crosley into the UFO and then into the computer, very good. Why am I using the headphone socket? Because I had 2 choices. I had the option of going direct from the cartridge into the UFO, or I could go. What have I got there? I can't cope with teeth right in the bass. I might as well go up listening to the music I like. Yeah, I know what you mean. When I used to go around to these people's houses and things, you have to listen to what they say, and you have to do what they ask you to do, and if you can, try and guide them down the right path. But if they wanted the treble down and the bass down, and you ended up with this thing that sounded like AM radio, well, they were paying the bills, and that was the thing. So, oh yeah, hang on, how many we got on here now? We've got 5 watching, and then we've only got 2 likes. I'm just going to click on it. We've only got 3 likes, so come on, people, click on the likes. If you wouldn't mind, it tries to convince YouTube that I actually have an existence. That's better, thank you. And that's just the way it goes. Yeah. Anyway, they used to sort of say, like, the customer's always right, and you have to be careful when you're dealing with them. But sometimes you could put, have you thought of doing it this way? And you'd set it up. Oh no, don't like that. Oh no, can you put it back to what it was, please? Yeah, sure, okay. And next time we go around, then maybe, just maybe, there would be, because in the old days, most stuff used to go wrong. I mean, all these people who advocate vintage equipment, most stuff used to go wrong, and you'd see them maybe once a year to go and just do something minor. But because they'd have 3 or 4 items in their house, so I suppose each item could go wrong once, and you'd be around there once a year for 4 years. and then start again. A bit like painting the fourth bridge. The fourth. May the fourth be with you. Again, we're coming on to things. I shall try. What have we got in there? Okay. I shall try and see if my script's of any use. And it says hello, which is beginning, but done that bit. Done a bit about the Crosley. I'll tell you actually what I did want to discuss, and this is there was a comment on the video from somebody, and they were saying that they are heaps of junk, which I would have to basically agree with. But I then thought about it, and like Calvin, we were talking the other day on one of the lives about whether having a sprung-loaded counterbalance on a portable was a bad idea, because at least it meant if it got jogged, it pulled the tone arm down, rather than a counterweighted one which would allow it to float. So sometimes these things aren't obvious, but if anybody hears more than a certain age, they probably remember the idler drive turntables, the BSR turntables with the droppy down county bit, like they have on the dance sits. They'd remember those, and those were awful. They were very good because they were mechanical. They did the job. There was no speed variation problems because they were locked to the mains. So it always played exactly the same speed until the idlers got gummed up. And then the speed would vary, but they would vary constantly. Either speed up or slow down, but it would be mains locked. And I remember some of the better ones actually they came with different pulleys of things. I was just trying to think which one it was. No, I saw one once, and it had a different size. I think it had a sort of sleeve that you slipped on for the 60 hertz, 50 hertz conversion. Philips had some stuff like that as well, which was all very good. But stuff in those days used to go wrong a lot. And the actual turntables, like I say, they were clunky and things. And they then started going. The evolution of the turntable was from idler drive to belt drive. Now, to get a belt drive turntable in the 70s, you'd made it. I mean, I paid 70 quid in 1973. 74? No, 75. 1975, I paid 70 quid for a TIAC, as it happens. No, a Rotel. It was a Rotel turntable with really nice counterbalance, everything. It was hi-fi. But 70 quid in 1975 worth now is, it says value in 1975. I'm on some sort of strange page here, and it's going to tell me. Let's go for the Bank of England one. This is money. They're all pretty naff, these sites. So just go with the first one that comes up. It says £100 in 1975 is equivalent to £1,073. So therefore, well, three quarters of that. So we're looking at 700 quid. I paid 700 quid for a turntable in 1975. My God. I had to save up for it. It was something do you know what? The thing I find most depressing about it is I don't know where it went. One of the problems with inflation, and you guys, you younger chappies, Kelvin says, to be fair, the spring-loaded arms had designed for purpose springs. I use a set of precision scales to measure the downforce for my cartridge. Yes, I agree with that, Kelvin. It's basically we're talking about horses for courses. If something's made to do it, possibly it does it better than something that's not made to do it. My turntable at 700 quid. One of the problems with it only being 70 quid when I bought it was that 5 years later, when 70 quid wasn't worth as much, in your head it's 70 quid. So when you then have the problem that, sort of, do I want to keep it? What do I do with it? Do I throw it away? It's only 70 quid. You've forgotten that things have gone up since then. It's just one of those things. Yeah. I've got going back to downforce, I've got the scales that everybody buys from eBay or from Amazon for measuring the downforce. I think they're worth having. They actually cost more than the cartridge, so, but so there's no point using them to save the cartridge. But you can use them to save the records. I was saying to somebody who put a thing on, a comment on Michelle, who sometimes comes on here. I think it was Michelle. Yeah, and she was saying she's got the steeple tone and whatever else and that, and totally and utterly forgotten where I was going there. Never mind, that's because I've got too many things on my mind. Let's go back to the script. Oh, it's only a car crash. Let's see. What I was going to ask was the reason I put the flip stylus on. It's the same reasons that Westlife did. I wanted to be able to put on the LP stroke 78 stylus, and I wanted to do it easily. I got the plastic turntable, the AOA, which I could put it's got a 3600 cartridge, so I could put a different stylus on it and then play that into Audacity because it doesn't do 78. Sorry. And I could then, sort of pull the sound out like that, but I didn't want to do all that. Yeah, that's 600 quid in today's money for a turntable. Yeah, it's a lot of money. I wouldn't pay that nowadays for a turntable. People say it's a lot of money to pay 350 quid for a TIAC W1200, which is slightly amazing. It's rather irritating that these things cost so much. What I was going to say was the main reason for upgrading the Crosley with the really cheap turntable is because I wanted 78 RPM, and with the history of turntables being the really old BSRs were clunky, horrible, nasty, and they used to have tremendous hum from the motors. The motors used to hum something rotten because they were hanging on basically rubber mounts, loose bolts on rubber mounts, and they just wore out, and everything clunked and clacked and bounced. But they were okay for playing records. They weren't okay for hi-fi. So then they developed or decided that they could afford to do belt drive turntables, and if you had one of those, you were winning. And like I say, I had a £600 one or £700 one in today's money, turntable belt drive, and it was great. And it had an aluminium platter, and it had really nice tone arm, and it really sounded good. And I've no idea where it went. And then after that, they then started developing the direct drive turntables. And the thing about direct drive is it was brilliant because the motor was the turntable. Even if it wasn't directly the platter, the actual turntable, the motor itself, was connected either by gravity or whatever to the platter, and so you didn't have the thing. Because the thing about the good thing about belt drives is you've got a small motor, it's spinning fast, and it makes so it's not going to wow. It's going to get up to speed, and it's going to make the turntable go round. And because it's running at a fairly high speed, you don't get the mains hum, you don't get the resonant thing. And if they can actually, Andrew Hyde, good, hello. He says, I seem to remember the Gerards were a bit like the BSR you described back 2 back then. Yeah, Garrard, and I'm pretty sure Garrard and BSR, if they weren't the same company, they were certainly using very similar, very, very similar things. Garrard SP25 was a good deck. I remember my dad trying to get one of those because it had a head shell was swappable. Yeah, that was the thing. By going for the high-speed motor, and they could move it away from there, because the biggest problem with rumble was what they were trying to get rid of, and rumble is low frequencies. So by spinning the motor fast, you've got high frequencies, and they're relatively easy to filter out. When I say relatively easy, I mean no frequency is easy to filter out, but high frequencies tend to be directional. If you put a nice sloppy bit of rubber, high frequencies don't tend to go through it. Low frequencies will, but high frequencies won't. So that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to get the rumble away. And then, as I say, the next thing they went on to was, like the Technics, was the proper direct drives. And I've seen a lot of stuff nowadays, because people are looking back rather than forward. And I've seen people saying, oh, belt drive is so much better than direct drive because of the cogging problem and all that. Well, there may have been a certain amount of cogging, which is the stepping of the motor, but I think they pretty well had it sussed, and they were always more expensive. But, we're talking super duper hi-fi stuff here. I haven't got 1,200 quid or whatever it is to buy one of those sort of turntables. And the Audio Technicas, well, they £500-600, £700 for the direct drive. That's still more money than I'm willing to spend on a record. Maybe I'm silly. Vintage guitars are still well sought after. Yeah, I think when you start looking back on things, sometimes you can, here's a diversity for you. All these people say how good vintage cassette decks are, how good vintage turntables and things were. But at the time, and this is where it gets important, at the time, it wasn't really a case of, if we make all these cassette deck bits out of plastic, we're making it really cheap and nasty, and it won't be any good. At the time, it was, if you want a really good quality hi-fi deck, be it tape or reel-to-reel cassette, or if it was the sort of thing that we're talking about on the record players, they started using plastic because it was the new material that they'd only just managed to use for. And I was thinking about this. If you take a car, if you go back about 25 years, 30 years, maybe 40 years, a car in the 70s was good for about 5 years before it went rusty. They used to have a 1-year guarantee on them. They were good for 5 years before they went rusty, and 10 years they'd be in the scrapyard. And that was normal. That is what you expected from a car. And then they started saying, well, they should be better than that. And they started putting plastic on them. And the latest cars have got a lot of plastic on them. And we're moaning about it again. But our car, which is still, as we still consider it to be the new car, our car is 9 years old now. We bought it in 2013, and it's now 2023. So in September it'll be 10 years old. And it doesn't look like a 10-year-old car of the 70s or 80s. It looks like quite a nice car with a few chips out of it. That's what the progression did. Here's another diversion for you. When my dad was 42, he had a heart attack, and in those days, because we're talking 50 years ago, there was an awful lot of people having heart attacks because of whatever. He was a smoker, but anyway, 40 odd, he had a heart attack. Went to the doctors, and the doctor said, no, nothing much wrong with you there. So he had another heart attack. Then they got a bit worried, and they sent him to the hospital. And the hospital said, yeah, you've had 2 heart attacks. That's bad. Not a lot we can do for you, except we can give you a triple heart bypass. And he said to them, well, okay, They said it's relatively new treatment, so it shows you how long ago it was. Relatively new treatment, and we think you'd be suitable for it because the heart isn't actually damaged, but there's nothing much what you can do about the tubes because we've got to do the bypass to make it work. And so I said, yeah, all right then. So how long? What's the prognosis on that? And they said, well, we don't know how long it's going to last because we've only been doing it for 18 months, but we know they're good for 18 months. My point being, when they introduced all this plastic into stuff, who's been listening to the Save the Planet people, and they're saying that it takes 10,000 years for a Tesco's bag to decompose and all this sort of thing. Well, who would have thought that the actual who would have thought that the bits in the cassette decks would start breaking after only 20 or 30 years because they've got old? I mean, we didn't think that plastic was going to be doing this. We thought it was here for good. So it's all very well looking back saying, oh yeah, they put all this cheap crap in it, but they didn't know they were. What they thought they were doing were making them lighter and better and using the materials in a responsible way, or at least that's the way I see it. But it is true, if you can get a cassette deck which hasn't got all the plastic in it, you can probably repair it. Not like cars. Have you tried repairing a car lately? All right, Andrew. I have an AT-LP 120 USB, and I'm really pleased with it. I should think you would be. I've heard good reports on that. Egil says, my son bought this Audio-Technica AT-LP3 for £300, and I must say that it's pretty good after listening to it for a couple of hours. Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to talk about. And Kelvin says cogging was a marketing myth. I would agree with you there, Kelvin. One of the things, it's very easy with audio to hear something and think, oh, that sounds nice. And then you listen to it for a while, and then it sounds not so nice a little bit later. It becomes hard on the ears. And I think that's down to things. You only hear the good bits, and then later on you start to hear the bad bits. The equivalent I would give that is, do you remember when you first saw HD TV and thought, wow, that's a smashing picture? And now you just take it for granted. Calvin, we're currently in a state of global cooling, according to Landon White in the late 70s. We'd be in an ice age now. Yeah. We're in Britain. If you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes and it'll change. Literally this morning, I said to my wife, oh, you'll never guess what the sunshine is. She says, well, that's what the weather forecast was. And then by the time we'd finished sort of filling about and whatever, went to get rest, and so filling about, went for a wee and whatever, came back in to get properly dressed, and the sun had gone. So, isn't it wonderful to be in Britain? That's why we all talk about the weather so much, because we have so much of it. We have rain, sleet, snow, hurricane-type winds, but they're not hurricanes. Tornado-type winds, but we do have tornadoes, but only when we're not having hurricanes or really heavy winds. I mean, you couldn't make it up. The actual thoughts on the weather are ridiculous. But when you see the American weather, they have bigger weather than us. I think they can be proud of their weather with their huge, huge hurricanes and tornadoes and things. I mean, we're only playing at it. And, some of that snow they had this year around that lake, just outside of New York, and that was absolutely amazing. Kelvin, the sun came out today here, and wow, the press will tell us we have a heat wave. Yeah, core, what a whopper, and all that sort of stuff. Excuse me. Last week, my wife was going to do a concert, which went very well, by the way. Anybody who knew about it, it was on Saturday, and she had a cold, which she contracted the week before, and up until Friday, she was still wondering whether to cancel the concert, and she managed to get rid of the major symptoms and keep her voice going until, Saturday morning we said, yeah, that's okay. Dosed up with the Sudafed and whatever else, and that was good. And she did the concert, and it was a real smash hit. And then 2 days later, we've both come down with another cold. I managed to avoid the last one. Right, Calvin, no, Andrew. I recently restored the Sony Walkman and took it into the office and everyone loved the sound of it. Maybe that's because we're so used to hearing digital streaming now. Now, there is an interesting thing. Do you know what we were saying about, or what I was saying about the little old ladies and things going around their houses and them saying, oh, it's got a lovely tone. There is something in that, I think, which is a few years ago I got an Akai reel-to-reel because I wanted to transfer some tapes I found of my dad and stuff, and unfortunately I couldn't get the ones I wanted. Mum had lost them over the years, but they're from 1961, 62. And anyway, I put them on. I couldn't find the ones I wanted, but the ones I did find I put on, and yeah, they absolutely sounded lovely. They didn't sound hi-fi, but they did sound lovely. And my wife suggested then that if I wanted, because we actually had money in those days, she suggested if I wanted to, I could get into collecting some reel-to-reel stuff and whatever. But I said to her, well, paying 80 quid for a reel-to-reel on eBay is one thing, to archive some tapes. But once you get into it, you're talking about a hell of a lot of money to try and get anything that's worthwhile, and we didn't have the space, so I sidestepped that one. But the immediate reaction to listening to it, bearing in mind that I've been in the business, certainly at that point, I've been in the business at 45 years, I think, having got into it from school virtually. It was amazing. But then I can remember when the Sony Walkman first came out, and with the proper Sony Walkman headphones, they were gorgeous sound. Nothing that we'd heard before was like it. My boss bought one in because we started using them, the proper recording one, the original. And we were using it to save digital. It was a real cry of shame, but he wanted small, good quality recorder to record data for a prompting machine. What would be, you would know, as a teleprompter. It was actually a company called Portaprompt, and we had to use that. So that was in the days when all the Commodore 64s and all that were using tapes. Well, we had to use a tape for a commercial purpose. Good fun. Digital streaming. PS Audio, Paul McGowan. He reckons that properly done digital of a analog source is as good as the analog source. And if you think about the way that analog and digital is done, it should be the case. But if I gave you, let me put it this way, because I come from a technical point of view. My ears aren't good enough to be able to argue with anybody about sound quality anymore. But if I went and got a jar of jam from Tesco's, and it was Bon Marie, top grade, £6 for a jar of strawberry jam, and then I picked up the Tesco's value strawberry jam. Which would I be able to say that the difference between the jam is the fact that the jams are different? They're all made of strawberries. They've all got sugar in them. They're roughly the same recipe. Or is the difference the fact that one jar's tall and thin and one jar's wide? And what about if I got it in a plastic container? If one of them was in a plastic container, would that make the jam more or less desirable? What I'm getting at is, that's a bit of a simile, if you like, but if you condemn the sound of streaming services or CDs based on the fact that they don't sound as good as something else, is that because they're not made the same way, or is it because they've not, they've not been done properly? I don't really, it's one of those debates. All I can tell you is that when I was working in a shop in Beaconsfield, which is local to me, advertising 96K PCM or DSD, I would agree with that. Yeah. 24-bit or 32-bit, obviously. Yeah, PCM or DSD. And obviously, we're not talking MP3. Although, having said that, if you do MP3 at a high enough bit rate and with the compression turned right down, you get some enormous files, which are very good. So again, it's down to the way they do it. But when I was in this shop, I was in hi-fi. I was the hi-fi repairman, and the young chap who was a bit of an audiophile came in, who was the shop sales chap. He was only young. I mean, he was probably 19 or 20, and I was 25, 26, something like that. And he borrowed one of the first. It was a CD player. I think it was a Philips one. We were Philips dealers, so it was probably a Philips one. And he borrowed this this CD player. Literally the week they came out, there was none of this sort of like you had to wait for it. I was working it. They came out. He borrowed it. He took it home. He came back on. I think he took it home on the Saturday night. Brought it back on the Monday, and his words were, "Wow, that was absolutely amazing. Yeah, I want one." It was £500-600, and it was a lot of money. And he said, "I want one. I really, it's what I've dreamed of. You can hear everything, blah blah blah." And then he borrowed it the following week, and he came back and he says, "I'm not sure about that." He says, "You can hear. There's something not quite right about it." He says, "You can, apart from anything else, you can hear them breathing, and you can hear something else and something else." He says, I'm really not used to that." And I said to him, "Well, it's very quiet when it's quiet, 96 dB, and it's very loud when it's loud, 96 dB. So you would expect that." And he was saying, "Yeah, but I'm just not sure about it." And I think that's the problem, because if you compare it to a record, which is what he normally used, which has got 46 dB signal noise ratio and 28 dB separation and various other things, apart from the fact they can, if you've got the right cartridge, go supersonic. The fact is that the music on a record is compressed, greatly compressed. Yeah, so Andrew says he's got a Philips CD610II, which still sounds great. Yeah, my brother bought a Sony around about the same time, about £700 he paid for it, and he was a bit upset about it because it only had a single DAC, although I think it was trying to oversample. I waited a few more weeks, and I bought a Philips. Can't remember which one it was now, but it had twin DACs, and that meant that you didn't get the because the way they multiplexed the signal. You ended up with the treble cancelling out. If you fed it down a mono, you'd kill the treble, because it was out of phase, 180 degrees out of phase at certain frequencies, obviously, because they were chipping and chopping. It's a shame, but then they went for twin DACs, and then you didn't have that problem. But DACs were originally very expensive, which is why it was. And then they went for all this double, triple oversampling and all that sort of thing, and then it all became marketing, and went from there. But my point being, what the thing plays back is what's on the disc, or what's on the disc is what the mixing engineer puts on it. Hence all this thing about loudness wars and all that. And also, if you've got a 96 dB signal noise ratio, so basically, if you turn it up, if you've got a good amplifier and you turn it up loud enough that you can hear the hiss of the silence on a CD player, like you do with a cassette deck. You turn it up so you hear the hiss, then turn it back down a fraction. If you do that with a CD, you will hear the hiss, and then if you hear the big bass drum come in at maximum output, 0 dB effectively, as in the maximum that it can output, which is probably it must be plus 96 dB. Apart from the fact your ears are going to bleed, apparently I'm now live. It's an hour in. Apart from the fact your ears are going to bleed, that's a hell of a difference, because it's a logarithmic scale. So if it was 50 dB or 60 dB like it is on cassettes, then when you've gone to 90 dB, you've actually, that's a lot of dBs. And twin DACs 4 times oversampling. Yeah, that's right. That's Andrew who's saying he's got a twin DACs 4 times oversampling. It's just one of those things. So you can't expect, if you were watching TV and you were watching the picture of a record. Think out of the box here. If we were playing a record back on TV and it had 40 dB of signal to noise ratio, that'd be a pretty flat, pretty washed out picture, a bit like the old Nick off disc TVs. It wouldn't have very much contrast, it wouldn't have very much detail, it would be pretty sort of well, the detail would be there because we're talking about being able to go ultrasonic, but we're talking about the contrast, the difference between the highs and the lows is pretty naff. And then you put on an HD DVD or Blu-ray, and then look at that with its super duper video dynamic range. I'm just trying to think what they call it with video. And hey presto, you've got yourself the really darks, you've got the really brights, you've got all the steps in between. If you look at a cheap flat screen telly from about 7 or 8 years ago, they used to have 800 to 1 contrast ratio. That's 800 steps. And then the one I've got in my living room, well, the one I've got on my wall is 10,000 to 1. So that's 10,000 steps. And then you go on to I've got a genuine plasma in the living room, and that's got over 10 million to 1 contrast ratio steps. Right, let's just see on here. Andrew Hyde, early DAC a bit noisy on low signals though. And Kelvin says, we've been at the mercy of loudness war mastering engineers for decades. Many great albums could sound so much better on any equipment. Yeah, I'll tell you what, one of the things, now this is something that Tony Villa was saying once, and I generally agree with him, because he was saying that one of the problems with streaming is they can turn it off. But if you've got the CD or if you've got the CD, or if you've got the cassette or the record, when you've got it, you've got it. And anybody who's got an HP printer will know about that problem. Let me move that back over there. Yeah, anybody who's got an HP printer will know about the problem that they can just change things for you. And I've been listening to some stuff on Amazon Music, and it comes up and it says remastered in 2011. And I'm thinking, well, what was wrong with the original? I mean, it was released on DVD, on CD already, and it sounded pretty good. Why have they remastered it? And sort of think, well, it's just not right. Now, they might have taken away some of the loudness wars, but they might have added to it, and you don't know. And then you're left in this position of not knowing. Whereas if you've got a copy of a CD, one of them things, and if you've got a copy of a cassette, copy on a cassette, one of those things, yeah. The version you've got is the version you've got, and if it's the version you like, that's the one you've got. And when they decide they're going to turn it off, well, they can't, except of course that your cassette deck could break. But what is it? Andrew Hyde says, hence why noise shaping was introduced, e.g. MASH. And Kelvin says MASH was just a sticking plaster. And Andrew says true, which is, they were talking about various other things as well to try and get back some of the niceness of some of the early formats. And I think the whole thing's a bit of it's a Pandora's box once you start going down it. That was why I was originally saying about upgrading. I've got on my script, which I wrote, on my play what I wrote, no, on my script what I wrote, was trying to do pointers, because I like to at least try and be prepared for these things. Have you ever tried to spell Intuo Denchi? It's not that easy. When you don't know how it's spelled to start with, I had to look it up. And, I couldn't find out how to spell it by using Google, because you needed to be able to spell it for Google to be able to find it, to be able to confirm how to spell it. I ended up using Bing, which is Chat GPT based, and that found it. That was quite good. What have we got here? That's right. What I was going to say was I couldn't do anything on I had to upgrade the 78 turntable on the Crosley, because it's if you watch I don't know, I can't remember whether it's Techmoan. I think it was Techmoan and Westlife. They've both done a thing on the history of turntables, and essentially I think it was the more in-depth one was with Westlife. The company that is currently making them is a direct descendant of the company that was making them when they first went over to China, and the plugs are compatible with the new ones and the old ones. Although they've got an extra 2 pins, you just put them in the right position, plug them in, and they work, which is quite interesting. But the problem is that you can't change the head shells on the really cheap ones. But they've got high-speed motors and all the rest of it. And at what point does it become cost-effective? And then I had a thing on here about how could one improve the normal system without spending a lot of money on it? That's what I wanted to sort of throw out to you guys. Egil says, yeah, they also sell reel-to-reel pre-recorded master tapes. Are they any good, by the way? Reel-to-reel master tapes. Well, they're not master tapes, are they? But they are tapes that are on reel-to-reel. Reel-to-reel's a superb format. Reel-to-reel is what I would say was, well, I've seen a broadcast standard reel-to-reel running at below cassette speed, and it was used as a monitor for, it was an output monitor for, I think it was LBC, and wow, it sounded amazing. But then there's quite a lot of tape involved, and it runs quite thick. The actual track width is thick, so they managed to get away with a lot of things on reel-to-reel they wouldn't do. What I was going to say was, unless anybody's got anything else they want, anybody got anything else they'd like to have a chat about? Because I'm about to go on to how to upgrade hi-fi, and so it gives you the opportunity to think about it. And if there's any questions on what to do or whatever, or any opinions wanted, I'm not particularly, how should I put it? I can't afford to go with expensive hi-fi, so I have to upgrade mine. And I've done it that way over the years, and I'm just trying to think of cost-effective ways of upgrading. I shall wait for a few more seconds, see if anybody comes up with an answer, and then I shall start on my monologue. It's not meant to be a monologue, but it works out I'm the only one talking, so it must be. I've actually written this down. Kelvin, half track, reel to reel at 15 inch per second, no going back. Unfortunately, due to space, I sold all of mine. Yeah, my dad, reel to reel that I said about, he had back in the 50s, he had the 15 inch per second modification done on his, and he had the so he had 4-speed. I don't know. Yeah, really good stuff. But as you say, Techmoan describes it as the most expensive audio hi-fi format in the world, and I'm guessing he's not far wrong. That reminds me, we were talking about, whilst you lot are thinking about that, I just thought, I haven't done the normal recap, is that the right word? Look at what's been on the other channels that I have an interest in, and any that anybody else has got an interest in, just point them out. Maybe we'll go and have a look. Techmoan did that's where the connection was. Techmoan did his mini hi-fi things. Could we finish with noting the passing of Turner? Now, who? I'm not au fait with that. So if you'd like to elaborate slightly on that, Kelvin, then certainly, more than happy. What I was going to say was that I was watching Techmoan's video on the micro system, and I really felt for him because he only had a problem with it. It had eaten a mini disc, and he wanted to fix that, and he got that bit out. And then, when he said that the blue bit had fallen off his ribbon cable, I thought, I hope he knows which side to stick the blue bit back on. And when he put it all back together again, cutting a long story short, it didn't work. So I won't ruin it if you haven't seen it. But that's why I bottled out on the Crosley. I did not want to be in the situation that Techmoan was in, where I had something that sort of worked and ended up with something that I didn't really have any use for. It's just one of those things, I suppose. Now, what was it? The other one was, oh yes, there was Cassette Comeback has started doing videos again. Tony Villa, and he did one on a big ghetto blaster, and Techmoan's new video of the current microsystem follows later this week. It's 45-minute marathon. Hopefully that one works better than the last one. It was. I got to give him marks out of 10, 9 for perseverance, but it was unfortunate, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier on about the way all this modern electronics. It's just there's so much in it, and it's micro-controlled and all this sort of stuff. It's not really what you want to be involved in trying to repair. And if you do, you've got to make sure you've got all the circuit diagrams and stuff, because there's no way you can guess your way through it. In the old days, when you bought a radio or something, if you took the back off, there used to be a circuit diagram glued to the inside of the case, and you could take that radio to any technician who was actually capable of repairing stuff electronic, and he would happily repair it for you because he had the details he needed. And there was only about 6 transistors available in those days, so one of them would fit. Only got 3 legs. One of them fit one way round. A little bit flippant, but you know what I mean. It was really a case of that. Whereas nowadays, of course, it's all dedicated flash ROMs and stuff. And if you can't get the exact chip, anything that isn't exact doesn't work. and if it doesn't work, there's no point in having it, which is where we end up with. Cassette Comeback, he did this boombox thing, and it was a large thing, but it wasn't particularly good. I did a video sort of based on his one, telling what I thought about it, but he did another one subsequently to that, which was a lot better. And yeah, it looks like we might be in for getting some better equipment coming in from some of these companies, but only if people buy it. I'm not advocating buying rubbish, but it's a step in the right direction. Westlife did an interesting video. He got some 54-year-old cassette tapes, new old stock, and they had they were new old stock music cassettes, and of all the ones he had, and there were about a dozen of them, only one had a pad missing, which was, it fell off when he opened the packet, and so he just glued it back on again. And so much for tapes only being good for 30 years. These ones were 54 years old, and they sounded like new. Really good, really good. I've got on here, when I was thinking about things earlier on, I wrote this script out, and you can't do scripts, lives on script, but now it says, this comes back to the raised question, how can one improve your normal hi-fi system without spending an arm and a leg or making an expensive mistake? We've gone to Kelvin. You have such problems not doing fine on IC today. It's usually just a surface mount black blob. Yes, and if it's not an IC, the thing with the surface mount stuff is if it's not an IC, it could be a surface mount resistor, a capacitor, or a transistor. It could be a FET. It could be a bipolar. It could be anything, and it's really, really difficult. And then, of course, you've got all the safety components, which have to be replaced if you're a proper technician with the correct ones. And they're one of the problems with some of the vintage stuff. Is if you take a cassette deck to or a television, why you take a television, I don't know. I suppose because you've got one and you want to use it. If you take one of those to a technician, and they find that the safety component is blown, and they're a proper repair shop, they have to, under law, or this is the way it was explained to us when I was doing it, if it says it's a whatever safety component, you have to put in exactly, not something similar, but exactly the one that is specified by the manufacturer. Now, you could put in something that is specified the same as the one the manufacturer's put in, but you can't say, oh, it's a 1 amp safety fuse, therefore I'll put in a 0.9 amp safety fuse. It's a 500 volt safety fuse, therefore I'll put in a 600 volt one. It will be the same. If you haven't got exactly the same parameters on your safety component, it is not a safety component, it is a bodge, and if something goes wrong, you will be held liable for it. What have we got on here now? My pure DAB radio has only the big black blob IC and application circuit. Yep, that sounds about right. So when the problem with the safety components is if you can't get exactly the right one, what do? What you do is you take it round to your mate who can fit a near enough good enough bit and make it work. But then, of course, he's not going to get sued for making it work, whereas the guy in the shop would have been and could have been and therefore won't do it or shouldn't do it. I was looking, that was the other thing a lot of people have a fuss about, all the space in the component hi-fi. There is something to be said for not having ICs in everything, or having the old style ICs when they only did 2 or 3 operations and they were off the shelf. But any ICs, if you got any components from the 70s, let me see, when was it? 75, 76. Yeah, I mean, ICs were common in the 70s, 74 series and whatever for Logic. And any of those things now, you try and get the right one, and to make something work. Whereas, as I was sort of hinting just now, you can still get transistors with 3 legs, and you could just whack one of those in. But it was done for the right reasons, I suppose. Now, I've got it on here. As far as it's very difficult to judge. If you think any hi-fi audio speakers, right, okay. What I was going to say was, somebody, like I say, said, why are you bothering with the Crosley? And I've got some speakers from a Sony Profile TV, and they sound absolutely gorgeous, and they are that big. They are literally that big. They stand that tall, they're that wide. They look like the sort of things you'd put next to your computer and would sound really tinny. But because it's from a Sony Profile monitor, they are absolutely gorgeous. And I've got some big speakers which look similar, ordered from Amazon, proper brand name on them, and they sound absolutely rotten, horrible, boxy, tinny, yucky. So obviously quality and things of the make are important, but when it comes down to it, it's the sound that's important. And these things, they can actually put out, I think it's something like 60 or 70 hertz, which is, for a speaker of that size, 60 or 70 hertz is low. And it amazes me when it comes on, when we're watching telly, because that's what we connected them to, and they go off to somewhere like, well, the Coronation was a good example, and they start doing boom, 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 boom. And you think, wow, where did that sound come from? And it's pretty damn good. So my thoughts were, if you've got a Crosley, it's actually got, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think the Crosleys are horrible. I think the electronics in them are overly complicated, overly cheap, and not particularly good. And if you've seen the back of my one, which you would have done if you've seen my video, it's just all sort of, you can't get to anything. I did all the wiggling of everything to try and see if it was going to work. It won't. I'm not going to take it apart because I wanted to. It was still acting as an amplifier. I said that before. But the actual amplifier on it, albeit 5 watts, isn't that bad. Put it into a couple of decent speakers, like the Sony Profile speakers that I've got, and that could sound very nice. I would argue that it wouldn't necessarily be hi-fi because they're not hi-fi speakers, but it would certainly be in the realms of, wow. I mean, when my daughter was in here and I was playing with signal generator, feeding it into the amplifier, she told me to stop when it got to about 19 kilohertz because it was hurting her ears. So, those speakers are good. So, my thoughts were, if you bought a Crosley, or was silly enough to buy a Crosley, or couldn't afford to buy anything better, so you've got yourself a Crosley, where do you go from there if you want to upgrade your hi-fi? Do you go out, do you throw that away, and do you buy another, some sort of, they still do sell mini systems other than Crosleys, but do you buy separates, and how much money have you got to spend? Are you better off buying a set of speakers? Well, I would suggest that if you bought yourself a couple of the proper, some of the nice Bluetooth type powered speakers, and you can connect them up via wires. So take the output from the back of the Crosley or from the headphone socket and feed them into the speakers. You're actually going to get yourself quite a nice sound out of that, albeit with a really naff turntable. But the turntable isn't that bad if you put a decent cartridge on it. And then once you've done that and you've got the thing up and running, you can then decide that you want to buy yourself a decent turntable. Because you've got powered speakers, you can then plug the turntable into the powered speakers, or with the new ones, of course, you can just Bluetooth it, which means you can still use the FM radio and whatever on your Crosley and still have good sound. So you've now got yourself a sort of a 78 RPM deck in the case of my one. You've got yourself CD, which should work, but my one doesn't. You've got radio, FM stereo, medium wave, etc., which should work. And you've got yourself a decent sound system in terms of your turntable. And you've only spent, whatever you want to spend on your speakers. So you could get decent powered speakers for £160 upwards. Or you could get yourself unpowered ones and literally run them off the Crosley direct out of the speaker outputs. Only 5 watts per channel, but you could get them running and you could spend £60-70 for that. So for about £120, £130, you could get yourself a decent sounding thing using the Crosley as a starting point. And then when you've decided you've got some more money, you could then start changing the stuff. Now, what's he got in here? Kelvin says, speakers all the way for the first upgrade if it's possible. Yeah, I would agree with you there after the pickup on the turntable. The rest of the stuff, the CD and the radio, that's working to spec. I've not tried one of these slot in the cassette goes in the side. What I do know is the one on my Crosley, which I was given, actually doesn't chew tapes, and it does fast forward and rewind. Well, it doesn't rewind, it fast forwards, but I don't know if it's any good. I haven't heard it. I'm guessing it's probably rubbish, but I wouldn't know. I haven't got the ability to try it. That's possibly a project later on to try it out, because it has got a metal flywheel. Everybody says they've got to have metal flywheels. They're no good if you haven't got metal flywheels. I'm not sure that that's really the proper way of doing it. Sorry. But, metal flywheels. I was quite surprised how the bits in it looked like they should be good. It's just that I know they're not. Right, thank you. What I've got on here, this was a thought process when I was writing out the script. It says, as far as cassette decks go, it's very difficult to judge because you can't buy new ones except for the TX, which are good, and the Marantz. Now, there's somebody going to be watching this saying, "No, the TX are rubbish." They're not. I will stake my claim to the fact they're not rubbish. They are not as good as some in the old days, but they're not rubbish. They're okay, which are as good as the Marantz. The TX, which are as good as the Marantz in the USA, which are cheap but not bad. Right, okay. What I'm trying to say there is there's the Ions and the Marantz and the Piles, the $100 jobbies, which are cheap. They are. I've got an Ion. They're not very good. They've got roughly the same mechanism as the TX, but the way they keep the price down is they are literally recorders and players, but they do double speed dubbing. They don't have any other facilities. They're piano keys, and the build quality of the cases is pretty naff. There we go. Yeah, TX 1200 is a winner. Yeah, I'd agree with you. My Ion, though, gives good sound quality when you record and play back on it. Not wonderful, but good. Compared to the stuff that's available, like the Walkmans and things, that Riboson and all that, they're yeah. And the other thing is that all of those decks that I've mentioned have got AC bias, so they can work properly if you get one that's not being fiddled with or is properly set up. And there's a couple of videos on my channel where you'll find that the Ion actually puts out a very good signal. Not bad at all, but I still don't like it. But that's just me being biased. I don't like it. I do like the 1200. I like the fact that it's got double deck and it's remote control. You can do parallel recording, blah 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 blah, soft touch, and it looks and feels nice. But then if you weren't sure of that, then you haven't watched my unboxing video on it, because that shows you exactly how I thought about it. Now, what I was going to say here was nothing on there. It says here that the files, it should probably give a similar sound quality, but the average quality of the build is pretty bad. Yeah. As for where the manufacturers have always chosen, so base level, and this is working on a thing called diminished returns, or I think, is it diminished returns? When you build something, and if you spend a penny on something, it will be of a certain quality. If you spend 2 pence to make it, it can be a bit better. And if you spend 3 pence on it, it can be better. Say pennies, think pounds, think dollars, think yen, whatever. Whatever you spend on something, you can always spend a bit more and make it a bit better. But how much more do you have to spend to make it much better? And this is where you start getting the problem, because you've got the if you're building an engine, there are things it has to do, and more than that, it's luxury. So this is why you get this returns thing. And this was a mistake the British motorcycle industry made. They stopped making small, cheap motorbikes because they said, and I heard them quote this, that it's almost the same price to make a small motorbike as it is to make a big motorbike. So therefore they decided to only make big motorbikes. And the trouble with that was that they were all expensive, and the problem with that was that new people to motorbikes couldn't afford them, so they bought cheap Japanese ones. And the trouble with that was that you had a good cheap Japanese bike, you'd then buy a good cheap bigger Japanese bike, and as you went up, I mean, I started off on a Yamaha FS1E, and I ended up on a Kawasaki 1200, but that was over several years. But during my original motorcycling career, I went FS1E, then I went RD200, then I went XS500, then I went Suzuki 380. That was a bad period. Then I went XS1100. They were all wonderful bikes, and because I'd started off on the Fizzy, I stuck to Yamaha, except for the 380, which was a disaster, and that was it. And then later on in life, I got involved with I got involved with the Zephyr, Kawasaki Zephyr 500. Then I got involved with a ZZR 600. That was absolutely amazing bike. And then I had a ZZR 1200, which was totally amazing, but in a different way. But the thing is, I wouldn't go for the British bikes, not because the British bikes weren't very good, but because they weren't very good. And I knew what the problems with the Kawasaki's and the Yamahas were. I didn't want to get involved with the British bikes that had problems, which were reported to us. But you didn't grow up with them, so why would you stick with them? It's just one of those things. So that was just a thinking process. So yeah, that's why I was talking about upgrading. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I'm boring this pants off you guys. It's coming up to 20 past or thereabouts. Has anybody got anything they'd like to talk about that's not me whittering on? Then put it in the comments. No, in the chat. We can have a go. What have we got there? Calvin, the problem with diminishing returns. Been down that path. My turn down could be better, just a shell or a low the unit. It once was. There are things I'd like to improve, but no, it's a waste of cash. Yeah, that's the problem. That is the problem that you have. I remember walking into this was a motorbike thing again. Went into a bearing shop that sold bearings, and when I say bearings, you know those round metal things with balls in them. And it was for a Yamaha, or was it? No, my friend's bike, a Honda. He'd had a problem with a bearing had gone in his wheel, and so we couldn't get one from the local Honda dealer because they hadn't got any in stock. And they suggested going down to the bearing shop. So we went down to the bearing shop, and the bearing shop said, yeah, we've got one of those. So we took it along with us and said, have you got a bearing like this? And they said, yeah. Do you want the £2 one or the £3 one? And we said, well, is that all? And they said, yeah. The £2 one is the equivalent of what you've got there, and the £3 one will last longer. So we said, right, we'll have the £3 one. Well, when you consider that Honda were charging 10 quid for them, it was. But that's the thing. The you don't know. You never know, do you? And that was that extra, but that was 50% more, £2 to £3, 50% more. Was it going to last that much longer? I used to sell windows. This is a thing for you. I went round a house once, and the guy says, "I need a door." Or no, I need some windows. I said, "Well, what do you want them for?" Because I used to work for a very expensive company. And I said, "What do you want them for?" And he says, "Oh, well, we're just doing the place up to sell it." I said, "Well, you don't want me here then?" And he said, "What do you mean?" "Oh, I want a quote." I said, "No, you don't." I said, "If you want to fill that window, you just want to put a bit of glass in the hole and sell the house. You don't want a quote from the company that I work for." And he says, "Well, really, I do. That's what I got you round here for." I said, "Okay, fine." I said, "It's going to cost you 1,500 quid for that window." I knew it was about 1,500 quid. And then he said, "How much? How dare you?" And all this. I said, "Well, that's the price of a window from our company. Comes with a 10-year guarantee, blah, blah, blah. But you don't want a 10-year guarantee. You just want to fill that hole with a bit of glass. So I suggest you go down the local, go down to B&Q's, buy a window. It's a standard size. Buy a window, put it in, and you'll be well away. You can sell the house, and it's not your problem anymore." And at that point, he realised that I was actually trying to be helpful, not awkward. I wasn't looking down on him. It was a case of, he didn't need what I was selling. Now, as it happens, if you came around my house, I happen to have a full set of windows of both styles that we used to do in my house. And I took out a mortgage for them and bought them. And the reason for that was because being in the trade, I actually knew what the quality of our windows was and that they were the ones that were worth having. And as we were just buying the house, and it was a lot of money. I mean, the house was 90,000, shows you how long ago it was, and the windows I think were 25 grand for the whole lot. But that was front door, porch, everything, all put in. But that was quite cheap because I got a staff discount. Why did I pay that sort of money for the windows? Because they came with the front have a lifetime guarantee, they're PVCU, and the rears, the porch had a 10-year guarantee because it was aluminium, and it's no quibble guarantee. You phone them up and say it's gone wrong, and they come and change it. End of story. Nice and simple. I used to go around people's houses and their windows were pink. You say to them, "Why are your windows pink?" "Don't know," they say. Well, I know what it was. It was the lead that was used to colour the plastic. But they spent 300 quid on a window, and they say to me, how much for that window? And you say, "Well, that's 650 quid. And they go, "What? We only paid 300 quid. And say, "Yeah, and the reason I'm here today is because you bought that window 5 years ago for 350 quid, and you could buy one tomorrow for 350 quid. But the reason I'm here is because it didn't last more than 5 years, did it?" And then they'd sort of realise that what you were saying. Anyway, that's just one of those things. It's just like, diminishing returns, diminished responsibility. Right, anybody else, anything to say? I shall wind it up there in that case. Got 9 watching now. 10 watching now. Oh, somebody else has come in. 82 minutes ago it says we started streaming. Anybody would like to click on the like button? It would be good. Now would be good. I can cheer myself up and see we've got 7 on there. And if anybody's got anything else they'd like to say or put on the chat, discuss amongst yourselves. Oh, we've got 8 now. Then that would be good. And if not, then I shall wind it up and I shall see you guys next week. I'm going to have another drink whilst I know it takes a while for these things to go through. I'm going to play my first 78 today, and I'm going to see if I can put it on YouTube. And if it doesn't, well, as long as I don't get a copyright strike. Is she gone? When did that happen? Kelvin's just put on, can we remember the passing of Tina Turner? Um, oh, she's 83. It came up live 31 minutes ago. After a long illness. Wow. So was that today then? I actually run a Facebook page, group, whatever you want to call it. It's one of these memories ones, and things like that I tend to be on top of. Nutbush City Limits, yes. I loved Tina Turner. I thought she was brilliant. I wasn't, you know, you could tell she was enthusiastic about what she was doing, and I would say that for her. She was really good. That is sad. That is sad. We've lost so many. Lost so many of these great people. So yes, okay.